Next up, we've got basic logical functions. These are your if, and or types of statements. We're going to be looking at 4 of them here. Now, starting with the if statement checks if a given condition or logical test is met and returns one value if that condition is true, another value if the condition is false. So the syntax looks like this. There are 3 arguments, starting with the logical test. This is any Boolean test, meaning anything that results in a true or a false. It could be text-based, like country equals USA, or it could be numerical, like weekday equals 1, or retail price is greater than 10. All of those are valid logical tests because they all evaluate to either a true or a false. Now from there, our second argument of the if statement basically says if that logical test is true, what value would you like to return? And then that optional third argument allows you to customize the result if that logical test is false. Otherwise, those rows will just show up as blanks. Next up, if error. This one evaluates a value or an expression and returns a value that you specify if the expression returns an error. Otherwise, go ahead and evaluate the expression just like you normally would. So it's a little bit wordy, sounds more confusing than it really is, but basically all you're doing is you're saying, if you get an error when you run this value or expression, instead of showing or displaying that error, display some custom value instead. Keep in mind that those errors can be very helpful and tell you some important information, so use it cautiously, but can be a great tool. Next up, we've got and it kind of speaks for itself. It checks whether 2 arguments are both true and returns true if that's the case, otherwise false. So syntax looks like this. You just plug in 2 arguments, 2 logical statements. Or is very similar, except instead of checking whether both arguments are true, it checks whether one of the 2 arguments is true. So same syntax, just using or instead of and. Now, important note about these two, I told you this was going to come up again. If you use the and or the or functions, you're limited to 2 logical statements. If you want to compare more than 2 statements or 2 conditions, you'll have to use either the double ampersand in place of and or the double pipe in place of or. Now, my tip for you is that using those symbols, the double ampersand, the double pipe, not only gives you more flexibility to work with more than 2 logical statements, but it's also a bit more readable when used in the middle of a function. I'm going to show you exactly what I mean in just a second. So that's actually a nice segue. Let's go ahead and pop into our AdventureWorks file and try writing some of these logical functions. All right, so once you have your file open, make sure that you're in the data view. And first things first, we're going to go into our customer lookup table, which I'm in right now. And the first thing we're going to calculate, just like the demo we saw earlier in the course, is a parent column. And the parent column will be a logical or conditional statement that looks at this total children field, and it says, all right, does this customer in this row have children? In other words, is the value in that column greater than 0? If so, we're going to call this person a parent. Otherwise, we're not. So great opportunity to use a simple if statement for that column. Let's go ahead and right click and add that new column. And let's actually just name it parent. This will be kind of a yes/no binary flag. And parent is going to start with an if. So if, and we're looking for a field with the word children. There it is, total children. Tab it in. So if the total children column from the customer lookup table is greater than 0, that's a valid logical test because it evaluates to only true or only false. Then I'll comma to my result if true. This means they have children, which means they are parents. So I can type yes in quotes because it's text, and then comma to my result if false. Remember, if I leave this blank, I'll see only yeses or blanks in the parent column. But instead of that, I'd like to use a no for the result if false and close the parenthesis. So when we hit enter to lock that in, you see that it's calculated. We scroll to the right, And there we go. We've got our parent field here. And if we scroll down, there's some no's where total children equals 0. So all looks good. There's your simple if statement. Next up, I want to calculate a column in our calendar lookup table. So let's head over there. And now the column that I'd like to add here in our calendar table is a column for weekend, which identifies weekends based on the days of the week. So we're going to use an if statement again, but now we need to integrate or as well, because a weekend is defined by day of week equal to 6 for Saturday or 7 for Sunday. So let's go ahead and see what that would look like. Right click, new column. We're going to name this weekend. And I'm going to start with the if or combination first. So we're going to lead with if, open the parenthesis, and now the logical test is where my or statement comes in, because I have two conditions that I'm testing for. And syntax wise, it reads a little bit strange, but instead of writing condition 1 and then the word or and then condition 2, I have to actually lead with the or here as well. So if or. And the same thing works with if and, where you now enter both of your logicals just separated by a comma. So if or, now my two logicals. The first one is looking for day of the week. So AW calendar lookup day of week equal to 6. No need for quotes there because 6 is a value, not text. And then comma to my second logical statement. Same idea. Calendar lookup day of week equal to 7. And my or statement is now complete. I've entered both logicals there. So I close the parenthesis to close out my or statement. And now I'm back in my if function. So I'll need to comma over to my result if true. So if either of these two logicals is true, day of week is 6, day of week is 7, then what value do I want my weekend column to take? Let's call it weekend. And then comma to the last statement, result if false. Rather than having non-weekend days show up as blank in this column, I'd like them to be labeled as weekday. Close quote, close parenthesis. You can see that it's highlighted my first parenthesis to tell me that I've closed out my whole statement, and that formula should be good. So let's press enter. And there we go. We see weekday, weekend for day 6, 7, Saturday, Sunday, all checks out. So that worked out pretty well. Now, just for the sake of demonstration, and because I actually prefer this approach over the one I just showed you, let's replace the if or approach with the double pipe or instead. So I'm actually going to delete this and write it from scratch just so we get a little bit more practice. So we're back to just our if. And this time I can actually write it in a readable way. So first logical test, if calendar lookup day of week equals 6. And now one thing to note, you can add spaces throughout the formula. So if that helps to space out the arguments or components, feel free to use those. And I'll try to do that just to make it as user-friendly as I can. So that's logical test 1. And now I'm going to hold shift and press that pipe under my backspace key and use 2 pipes in a row, which basically does the same thing. It serves the same purpose as an or statement, but I can insert it right in line between 2 logicals, or 3 or 4 or 5, etc. So if the day of week equals 6, or lookup day of week equals 7, and I can just comma since I didn't open up a new parenthesis with an or statement. Now I'm in my result if true as part of my if function. So if either one of these is true, weekend, otherwise result if false, weekday. Close quote, close parenthesis, enter, and there you go. Just refreshed, no values changed. We didn't expect them to. Which approach you use is totally up to you. If you're more comfortable with if or, that's fine. If you like using the double pipe, that's cool too. And just note the same exact logic applies if you're using and statements here. You could write it as if and, or you could write it with the double ampersand, just like we use the double pipe. So there you have it, calculated columns with basic logical functions.